So I want to thank the Canadian Science Policy Centre for putting this together and for inviting me here. I'm very pleased to have a chance to chat with you about my own experiences, as well as what I've learned, I think, from being now on many, many faculty search committees, many assessments of my colleagues in the course of merit increase considerations, a few tenure committees, et cetera. First, sort of my timeline. I sort of have a fairly linear timeline, as you heard. I'm now a professor at the University of Toronto Scarborough. I became a full professor 2 years ago, and I'm a Canada Research Chair. The part that's not on my CV is that I'm also part of a two-career couple. My husband is also a PhD who did a postdoc and research associateship at Cornell when I was doing my PhD and basically hung around as long as he could till I finished. He's now also a professor in the same department and is now the department chair. So we have a challenging two-career couple in certain ways, which also includes our two kids, which seem to have disappeared here. We had one child while assistant professors and a second as associates. So we have learned how to balance home and life to some extent, and I think that was part of our biggest challenge. There are some programs and policies that have helped us with that. One is a now defunct program from NSERC, which was called a University Faculty Award. This was a competitive award that allowed departments to open new salary lines for women and later for Aboriginals as well, who were then hired as part of a competitive process, but only within those groups. My position started as one of those University Faculty Awards, or as some people called them, a women-only search. The University of Toronto also had policies that made it easier for us to manage this sort of balance. One is that they do have some spousal hiring policies. I will tell you up front that that is rare, but if you have serendipity and hard negotiating, it can work out. In our case, the serendipity was that my husband had a very good research record and had similar research to someone who would be retiring soon, so he could take up that salary line. And we had other options, so we were able to say, no, we're not coming unless we get what we really want. And then finally, it's not on here, but the tenure clock provisions, once you do have a faculty position, that they actually stop the tenure clock while you're on maternity leave is very helpful. So you're not expected to turn out papers during that time. Although I did have a mentor who said, and I quote, "Maternity leave, a great time to write some papers." There are kids. I wasn't going to say male mentor, but yes. And here's the kids, sorry, Lily and Glenn. So what's not on the CV as well is that what really helps in this case is strong support from wherever you can get it. In our case, our department is fairly young in terms of structure. People are very supportive of people with families in the department. We also have very supportive and flexible senior administration. They're seen hugging a raccoon on campus. Also really important is on-campus daycare. These kinds of things are not surprise. If you have support networks that are close to home, it can help you manage the challenges, which are largely time challenges. And I don't get kickbacks from them, but oh, if it wasn't for grocerygateway.com, the kids would have no lunch many days. What's also not on the CV, unfortunately, are some attitudes that were challenging to overcome. So this was one of the comments I remember getting early on. Oh, you're the woman hire. And so this is an issue we might want to bring up that often comes into play when you talk about equity and diversity programs. If there's a restricted pool of people from whom they're choosing, even though that's meant to redress an imbalance, this is the type of attitude you sometimes have to deal with. And my husband got this one. You're the spousal hire of the woman hire. I also got this kind of comment fairly frequently or something to that effect. If I was having problems dealing with some sort of issue, in my case, poisonous black widow spiders have a number of biosafety regulations that require that I interact with the local hospitals, et cetera. When they weren't doing what I needed, I would get this sort of attitude from some people when I talked to them about it. Many people just don't take young women seriously, which to me makes it clear that they, in fact, are some of those many people who don't take young women seriously. So these perceptions and the reality of gender bias does exist. And as as Wendy said, I believe it's moved from really overt expressions of bias, even though I did get some of those, largely to unconscious biases that influence people's behavior, but are much harder to regulate or to protect yourself from. You need to recognize that they're there. In this example from a survey of scientists in 2010, this is a L'Oreal AAAS survey of men and women scientists, women consistently say that gender bias is a significant impediment to their career progression. It's not something that men are generally concerned about. It is real. There is considerable data on the influence of unconscious biases on our behavior, on our assessment of other individuals, and on what we expect of other individuals. Gender schema is a term that comes up frequently in this regard with respect to women. Schema are essentially mental shorthands we have that allow us to make quick categorical decisions about things. Unfortunately for women, these schema are often, the categories are often male and female, and they often deal with what people expect from you with respect to science and your accomplishments. I want to talk to you about one study that was particularly influential for me as a graduate student. It was this one by Wenneras and Wold in 1997. Yes, it was 16 years ago, but it was still shocking. It's data from a Swedish Medical Research Council study, or from postdoctoral applications to the Swedish Medical Research Council, Sweden being one of the places that we thought had achieved pretty close to gender equity in a lot of areas. These researchers got access to data on reviewers' scores for applicants to this program, where they were rated on 3 categories: scientific competence, relevance of the research, and quality of the methodology they were proposing. Women were ranked lower across all 3 categories consistently. And not surprisingly, when the fellowship competition concluded, 8% of female applicants received fellowships compared to 24% of male applicants. The authors didn't shy away from the possibility that maybe women, in fact, had lower impact research than men, because what they noticed was that the largest gender differential in the ratings was with respect to scientific competence. So what they did was calculated a gender-blind rating of total impact of research and compared it to the reviewer competence scores. What you see on the x-axis is an index that includes both number of papers and the impact of the journals in which they were published. And the grim fact is a female applicant had to have 2.5 times the productivity of a male applicant to get the same rating from a reviewer. These are male and female reviewers, okay? It's not just men who are doing this. It's not just men who have gender schema. It is women as well. You can get comparable data on gender bias in a wide range of studies. I haven't cited them all here. I'm a data junkie, so I would have slide after slide after slide. Letters of recommendation in a very recent, letters of recommendation for undergraduates applying for lab manager positions. Assessment of competence and salary offerings and hiring. Invitations for presentations at conferences. Tenure review assessments. And some of these studies are very recent. There's many recent studies. It's not imaginary. It's not imaginary. Gender bias exists still. It's largely gone underground. It's largely in terms of unconscious biases. It's just as much of a hindrance to career progression as it ever was. The imposter syndrome can interact with these kinds of things because, of course, if you have an external forces telling you that your work is insufficient and you're internalizing that and you also have your own doubts about your own quality, that can make this that much worse. And it's perhaps why, even though imposter syndrome is also found in men, it has a bigger effect on women's career progression than it does on men. So I'll give you 2 examples of ways in which I think we can think about policy changes that might affect this. One is double-blind assessment and review. This is a result of a study done in my own field in which they looked at the number of first authored paper by female authors during a period in which there was single-blind peer review, and after one of those journals in 2001 introduced a double-blind peer review system so that no one knew the gender of the authors. And what you see is that the number of first authored papers by women published in these journals after, this is a differential, the percent change in the proportion of papers first author females goes up by 7%. In terms of number of papers, this is a 33% increase in the number of papers with females as first authors, just as a result of the double blind. Comparable journals with single blind, with no change in their editorial policy, showed no change in the proportion of female authors. We have the data. We need to start applying it to things like manuscript review, grant application review, fellowship application reviews. Also thinking about ways in which our systemic structures in universities, looking at job applications, merit evaluations that happen internally, are there ways of making them blind to gender, at least in the initial assessment. Finally, I think the most important thing that we can do is education, not just education in the form it is currently, which is, for example, when I'm on a search committee, I'm told about how to make sure that we adhere to policies on gender in search committees, make sure that there's an equal number of women, et cetera. Instead, we need to give people data on the biases that exist. I know my colleagues, they believe graphs. Just telling them that they need to adhere to the policy does not result in a change in their behavior. Telling them that they may have a bias and why and exactly how it might work, like they do here on the Rutgers website for search committees, would potentially be much more effective. And then finally, I want to challenge you all to look at your own unconscious biases because they do affect behavior. Harvard has a project, Implicit Project, in which they look at implicit social attitudes towards various groups based on race, based on gender, based on sexuality. I challenge you to take a look at whether you have any unconscious biases that might be affecting your own behavior and encourage your friends and your colleagues to do the same. Thank you.